Hey guys, it's John from That DIY Couple. Today I'm going to tell you how I ran Airbnbs for about 4 years, starting in 2014 until 2018. In that time period, I made over $900,000 in revenue from 5 short-term rental properties. I averaged about $20,000 per month over these 4 years. Across my different properties and listings, that was over 22,000 nights of hosting. I hosted hundreds of different guests, and I did most of this before I turned 30. And most of it with a full-time job. These were also not high-end luxury expensive properties. In fact, I basically never charged more than $100 per night for a listing, and the average amount I made per night was probably about $40 per listing. I'm about to do a series of videos about how we got started out in Airbnb, why we stopped doing Airbnb at these properties in 2019, how I make money with Airbnb today, the things I learned, legal issues, and most importantly, how you guys can do the same. But in this video, I just want to talk about how much we made. If you're interested in this topic, please like and subscribe and let me know down below in the comments. Okay, so Shannon and I started doing Airbnb in 2013. We were living in New York City in a small apartment and had a roommate who wasn't there on the weekends, who allowed us to rent out his room to reduce his rent. It was a small bedroom on the Upper East Side of New York, and we rented it out when he wasn't there. In 2013, we made about $1,500 from that. We kept doing that in 2014 until we moved to New Jersey in April, which made us about $12,000 in 2014. We also rented out our whole apartment for a few months before our lease was up and we moved to New Jersey. In 2014, we moved to New Jersey and started renting out the house that we lived in on Airbnb. We'll call this house number 1. It was a 2-family house, originally 4 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms in each apartment. The key strategy that we discovered in 2014 was renting out individual bedrooms within this house to individual guests. We started doing this with originally 1 bedroom in the house, then both bedrooms in one of the apartments. We then converted a living room into a bedroom on the first floor and ultimately moved into the basement of our own house just so that we could rent out our bedroom on Airbnb. That meant 5 total bedrooms in Airbnb by the end of the year. In total, in 2014, we made almost $39,000 from house 1, which was about $6,500 per week once we started renting it. We also bought a second house, also a 2-family that we'll call house number 2, and employed the same strategy and made about $1,000 from that in 2014. In total in 2014, we made a little over $51,000 from our New York City apartment, house number 1 and house number 2. In 2015, things started to go really nuts. House number 2 had a total of 8 bedrooms, each of which we rented out separately. We discovered the key insight which allowed us to be as successful as we were, which was that instead of renting out rooms nightly, we rented each room out essentially monthly to people coming into New York or New Jersey for school or work that needed a place to stay for a while but couldn't afford an entire apartment. Most of the people that ended up staying with us were in their early 20s, and they usually stayed about 2 or 3 months at a time. We called this type of rental medium-term rentals, and this is what we did for the rest of our time at all of our properties going forward. It made the logistics of what we were doing much, much easier and was almost as profitable as doing true short-term nightly Airbnb rentals. In 2015, house number 1 was basically fully rented for the entire year, and we made $75,000 from that house. House number 2 was also basically fully rented, and we made over $110,000 on that property that year. We bought another house that year. This is a single-family house. We'll call it house number 3, and made almost $6,000 on that by the end of the year. That's a total of $192,000 for the year, or almost $20,000 per week. The next year, 2016, was our most successful year of our entire time doing this. Houses 1, 2, and 3 were fully rented basically the whole year. We also bought house number 4 and house number 5, and did the same strategy that we had done on the first 3. In total, that was 5 more bedrooms that we bought on top of the 16 bedrooms we already had, so 21 total listings. We were actually still living in a basement during this time, actually of house number 2, and both of us still had full-time jobs doing other things. However, in 2016, that's the year that I left my full-time job and started doing real estate investing full-time, which is what I do now. In 2016, house number 1 made a little under $70,000 that year. House number 2 made about $90,000. House number 3 made $40,000. House number 4 made $22,000, and house number 5 made $11,000. Houses 4 and 5 were only for part of the year. But that's a total of $232,000 for the year, or about $22,000 per week. In 2017, we continued doing the same thing, except we stopped doing Airbnb at house number 5. I'll get into that in another video. House number 1 made $60,000 for the year. House number 2 made $80,000 for the year. House number 3 made $24,000. House number 4 made $30,000, and house number 5 made about $12,000 for the first part of the year. That's $206,000 for the year at about $17,500 per week. And finally, in 2018, our last full year of doing Airbnb, we renovated an apartment in house number 5 to increase our total capacity. House number 1 made $54,000, house number 2 made $78,000, house number 3 made $40,000, house number 4 made $53,000. That's a total of $226,000, or about $19,000 per week. Now you might notice that our revenue per house went down mostly in the last few years, and that's due to a couple of different factors. First, we became a lot more strict about only hosting people for at least a month. In some of the earlier years, if we had gaps between guests, we'd try to fill it with people that were staying truly short term. That happened a lot at the end of the year or maybe the end of the summer. But that was really too much of a hassle to allow all the turnover, and we stopped doing that almost entirely in 2017. Second, there was increased competition in our area for the types of rentals that we were renting out. So we found that to be more competitive, to get the vacancies that we wanted in our properties, we had to be more competitive on pricing. And finally, some of these properties were getting pretty old after having used them pretty intensely for Airbnb purposes for a few years. They had older furniture, older bathrooms, kitchens, and we frankly probably didn't spend the money that we needed to keep these running at 100% tip-top shape. By 2017, I was managing personally dozens of properties, dozens of listings across these properties, and so it was a lot for me to keep up with it. Again, we'll go into that in a different video. So that's how much we made over our years doing Airbnb in New Jersey. If you want to know how we did it, how much we actually spent on things like cleaners, maintenance, mortgage, taxes, again, I'm only talking about revenue in this video. We also have a bunch of expenses and all the other details of how we operated it. Please stay tuned for future videos. I'm going to talk about all of that. But until then, thanks guys, be well, and always make things better. Oh.